law updates that matter. This is the HR Buddy podcast with Damien McCarthy and the HR Buddy team.
Hello everyone and welcome to the HR Buddy podcast and webcast. Thanks to everyone who's live with us today on the show, and if you're watching back or listening on YouTube or Spotify, you can watch this podcast for free, so thank you very much and please keep spreading the word. I'm Damien McCarthy, Managing Director of HR Buddy. HR Buddy delivers HR consultancy, employment law advice and support to businesses across Ireland. We also have payroll and employer of record services and our HR Buddy Manager platform. Now, I'm joined on today's show by our HR consultants, Liz Cummings and Conor Ryan. Good day, folks.
Hi,
How are you doing?
Hi, everyone.
They've been rehearsing their hellos all week, so they've done very well there. They've absolutely no problem with employment law and HR advice and support, but saying hello is a big challenge. So you've done very well there, guys. Well done. Okay, so as we are doing the live webcast running alongside our podcast recording on today's show, we have a live Q&A at the end of the show. So if you're there in the background live with us, thanks for being here. And if you want to go to chat and leave a question or a query, we'll get to it in our live Q&A at the end of the show. But we have a busy agenda to get through, so we'll try to get going.
Thanks.
The agenda for today's show is we're going to be taking a look at navigating family leave this summer. So obviously summertime can be complex. It can be challenging for an awful lot of, in particular, I suppose, working parents. Kids are off school, there's summer camps running, all these types of things. So it can become a challenge, and there can be a lot of requests in the workplace with regards to flexible working hours, time off, annual leave, public holidays thrown in there. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of, it can be busy in workplaces, obviously, as well. So we're going to be going through that, trying to help you in a number of areas and give you advice in those areas. We're also going to go into detail a bit on public holidays on today's show. As always, we'll take some employment law cases, some cases that were at the WRC to see if we can get some key analysis and findings. I think there's some very interesting ones in there in today's show, including a very recent one where an employee takes off and works from India without the employer knowing and so on. And we'll talk about that one in particular in more detail a little later on in the show. Remember, the live Q&A session is at the end of this podcast. So if you're on live with us, pop into chat, pop your question or query into the Q&A section, and we'll run through those at the end. We've had great questions in previous podcasts, so it's always a very good area. Okay, so navigating family leave this summer. I suppose, Liz, I'm going to come to you first. Liz Cummings, HR business consultant with HR Buddy. There are four areas we're going to take a look at here. One is parental leave, then there's parents' leave, there's the right to request remote working, and the right to request flexible working. So those four areas. So let's zone in on parental leave first and give us some of the guidelines there, Liz.
Thanks, Damien. So I'll start with parental leave just because this is probably one of the ones we get asked about the most. Parental leave would be unpaid leave, and that allows parents to take up to 26 weeks off per eligible child up to their 12th birthday. However, this would be extended to 16 years of age if the child has a disability or illness. And in most cases, your employees would need about 12 months continuous service before they're entitled to take this. And another thing employers often don't realise is that parental leave isn't something that employees have to ask permission for. While yes, they have to notify you, they don't need your approval. And it's an important difference to make there, which we will come back to because there is an important WRC decision that sets that out quite clearly.
Yeah.
Notice-wise, employees need to give at least 6 weeks notice in writing, and then followed up by a confirmation letter from the employer, just confirming when that leave is to begin. Now, with the parental leave, it doesn't mean that employers have absolutely no say how this is taken. But if an employee wants to leave or to take that leave at any time, and it would have an impact on the business, legislation does allow employers to postpone that leave up to 6 months. However,
Yes.
just because you can postpone it doesn't mean, that even if it's inconvenient for you, it doesn't mean it can just be postponed. So if you're thinking, oh, well, we're going to be busy that month, we're just going to refuse it, it doesn't work like that. You still need to provide strong justification to postpone. So look at the nature of their duties. Are they part of a critical project that might have deadlines hitting when they want to take that parental leave? Yes, you would be entitled to postpone it there. It could be a case that other employees are on annual leave or taking any other leave at that time. So again, you are able to postpone for genuine reasons. So
Yeah.
we can compare that then a little bit with parents' leave. Again, despite similar name, it is completely different. So parents' leave is paid, and that's for parents of a new baby or following an adoption. And with parents' leave, you're entitled to take 9 weeks leave, and that generally needs to be taken within the child's first 2 years. So, unlike parental leave, there's no minimum service requirement to take this leave. So, it's a day one right for all employees. When we
Yeah.
look at the paid entitlement as well, if employees have enough PRSI contributions, they're entitled to a benefit from the Department of Social Protection, and that's increased by €10 this year up to €299, whereas again, parental leave is unpaid. Now, regarding notice then for the parents' leave, they need to give 6 weeks notice before taking this leave in writing as well. However, this can be postponed up to 12 weeks, giving similar reasons to postponing parental leave as well.
Yeah, and like one important thing, I think between all the leaves and all the new legislation we've seen over the last number of years, the notice periods do get confusing. We always get asked about them. Just important to reiterate that a good way of remembering it is, the parental leaves, the parental leave and the parents' leave, they're both 6 weeks. I'd also say, you thought there it is about, maybe postponing for business reasons and so on. And it is important to say, this is a right, and yes, you can postpone. But I think, again, it's always very important if you're getting that parents' leave request or that parental leave request that you sit down with the employee and discuss through, the workloads, the deadlines, what's needed for your business, for your customers, and kind of come to an agreement. Because very often there is, some sort of flexibility needed, and flexibility works both ways. Whilst it is a right and an entitlement, flexibility works both ways, and very often people, I think of an example recently where there was end of year financials due, and the employee and the employer came to an arrangement with regards to how the parents' leave was going to be taken, because there was a critical part of the year and there was an interruption then agreed upon. So I suppose, it's important to talk these things out and come to an agreement as well. Okay, so the other two areas you're going to take a look at for us is, I suppose, the newer legislation, the right to request remote working and the right to request flexible working. And I suppose the big difference here is it's a right to request. It's not a right that you're entitled to it. It's just a right to request. But go through both of those for us, Liz.
Yeah, spot on, Damien. So with flexible working, again, keyword there is it is a request to do the flexible working or the remote working. It's not an automatic entitlement for employees, and I think that really trips a lot of people up. So when we look at flexible working, it's a request for a new working arrangement, and that's open to parents of children under 12 or again 16 if they have a disability or illness. And also it's for employees who provide maybe personal care for a close relative. So that could be a parent, a sibling, a spouse. So when we look at when they can request this, they can do that from day one. However, with flexible working, an employee would need 6 months continuous service until that passion kicks in. So while they can request the right to flexible working from day one, the entitlement doesn't kick in until 6 months. So when we look at the notice as well for that, they need to put that in writing at least a minimum of 8 weeks before they propose to start that passion. So that request needs to explain what they're looking for. So it could be that they're looking to reduce to maybe part-time hours, job sharing, flexi time, or compress their hours. They also need to state if they when they'd like to start, what the proposed date is, and the duration of it. So it's not necessarily a permanent change. It could just be a temporary fix for them. So it could be a case that they want to do flexi working for the 3 months of the summer, however long that they need to. So when we consider these requests, we again look as an employer at the operational impact, your staffing level, client, customer requirements, and whether that arrangement is workable for you. Now, you are entitled to, with this request, to get any supporting evidence, so a birth certificate for the child to prove age. However, for people who are maybe in a caring situation, you can also ask for proof of their relationship to that person concerned and any appropriate medical evidence of that care that is need to be provided. And again, similar like before, if you can't accommodate that request, again, you just need to explain
Yeah.
why. So the same principles apply to remote working. And I think this is probably one of the biggest misconceptions since COVID, is that employees don't have a legal right to work from home, but they do have a right to ask. So again, we keep making that distinction throughout. They need, again, 6 months service before that arrangement begins. And similar to flexible working, 8 weeks beforehand, when they want that arrangement to begin, is when they need to put that request in. So again, employers just need to look at things like the role itself, confidentiality, what that means working from home, data protection laws, lack of supervision. We find is probably one of the biggest reasons why employers don't allow remote working. Health and safety concerns. What environment are they working from? You can't always control that. Customer service, and again, just how that arrangement works in practice for you. Now, some requests will be pretty reasonable. Again, we're talking today about navigating family leave. It could just be that you want to be, while you expect your employees to work, they might just need that little bit of time at home for any drop-offs like summer camps, etc. It won't always suit every business, and I think that's kind of one of the points to make. So again, you can consider the request, but you don't have to agree to it. So, and again, like flexible working, it's not a permanent arrangement. It can also just be for a fixed term.
Yeah, and again, I think the middle ground, Liz, the kind of common ground between the employer and the employee is very important here as well. I mean, if you receive a request for flexible working, it may not be something that you can accommodate, but there may be an alternative arrangement that you can get there. So, someone may want to, job share, decrease their days down to 3 or 4 days a week during the summer or something like that. It might be a step too far, but again, I would always advise, as I did when we were talking about the parents' leave, sitting down and trying to come to some sort of an alternative arrangement. Because very often kind of refusing something point blank and not having, that kind of personal conversation with the person, maybe leads to disgruntlement and poor employment relations kind of medium to long term then as well. So like maybe there is a common ground that can be found. The other point I would make before we go and have a look at a WRC case, Liz, is that it's very, very important that workplaces and employers realise how important the process is with regards to the right to request remote working and the right to request flexible working. You can't be challenged at the WRC on the merit of your decision, whether you've granted permission or rejected it. But you can be challenged on whether you followed the process. And if you look at the few WRC cases that exist in this area, and I can remember one in particular in recent times where the employer fell down on not responding within the 4-week time frame. And that's how the employee won the case. They missed the 4-week, so like it's the 8 weeks written notice from the employee detailing everything that you went through there, Liz. But then the employer must respond. Excuse me. Yeah, within 4 weeks. And like if you're getting that process wrong, that's where you will fall down. Okay. You're going to take a look at the WRC case, which is relative to what we've been talking about. Liz, tell us about it.
Yeah, so I suppose touching a little bit back there on parental leave, I suppose remarkably, there's not a lot of WRC decisions in this area, which I look at as really quite a positive sign that most employers in Ireland tend to be managing family leave requests pretty well and have a good
Yeah,
understanding of their
yeah,
policies and obligations. But that said, when cases do arise, it will often highlight the smaller issues with it. So, and one such case was the Elizabeth O'Reilly versus Vista. Now, this is in 2023, but it's a great reminder that sometimes it's more about the wording of your policies and not your intentions that will create that risk. So, in this case, the employee's parental leave policy stated that employees needed approval from management and their HR team before an employee took parental leave. So, on the face of it, that might not necessarily sound unreasonable. A lot of employers, have approval processes for things like annual leave. So it is easy to understand how similar wording, could end up in a parental leave policy. But as I mentioned, it's not necessarily working that way with parental leave. The WRC found in this instance, because parental leave is a statutory entitlement, employees don't need management approval. So, employees, once they've complied with legislation, they've given the correct notice, employers can't simply approve or refuse the request. So, the only real option is postponement, which we talked about, and even then, only in limited circumstances can we postpone that leave. So the adjudicator actually directed the employer to amend their policy and remove the approval requirement. So it's a really important takeaway there. I think sometimes employers, they don't necessarily get into difficulty because they're ignoring it. They get into the difficulty again due to the policy and maybe the process surrounding it. So again, that's why we always recommend that you regularly review your policies and your
yeah.
handbook.
We do that type of work all the time. We're reviewing policies. Like it is amazing. It is worrying how many poorly written policies there are out there, and we see that a lot when we are reviewing documentation with new clients and so on. But I suppose again, the important point is here, especially with remote and flexible working, the process, as I said, is very, very important. And here we see a WRC case dealing with parental leave where it's it's the policy really that was the crux of the problem. Um, okay, Colin, I'm going to bring you in here. I suppose, like, what's your advice in this area? What are the main tips to maybe sum up advice you would give to workplaces with regards to navigating family leave this summer? I mean, I'm sure you'll agree. We see, the challenges of it all the time in workplaces, and I think it can be stressful on a lot of workplaces. Well, there's a lot of juggling that goes on for an awful lot of people during the summer, and it's a busy time and it can be challenging.
Absolutely, Damien. And look, there's no doubt that summer is one of the most challenging times for managing employee leave. And I think that's certainly reflected in the calls and the queries that we get into HR Buddy on this topic. I guess as the volume of staff looking to take their annual leave to go abroad or maybe to attend festivals, sporting events, things of that nature increases, while at the same time parents are trying to navigate the school holidays and looking at the various options there, as Liz has outlined, in terms of the different types of statutory leave and so on. I don't know if I've seen some of my connections putting up posts of their Excel sheets, for example, of their summer planning lists in terms of the color coding blocks of the different summer camps, kids' activities, drop
It's a
off
lot
and collection
easier.
times.
It's a lot easier when they just go to school and you know where they are. But
Absolutely.
yeah, it is very challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, so we know people are trying to juggle, competing agendas, while at the same time, in terms of the business, the show must go on. So managers now you're trying to balance business continuity, at the same time with employee flexibility requirements, and ultimately, I guess, employee well-being. So it's difficult. So what we would recommend is a clear and consistent suite of employee leave policies. That's the foundation, really, in terms of effective leave management. The policies in your business, they must be up to date. They must be in line with the statutory requirements. So have they been reviewed, and have they kept pace with the changes in the statutory leave entitlements? That's important, because I can recall, for example, we addressed sick leave and absence management in a previous episode, and one point that came up there was ensuring that, and it's a common thing, that ensuring that the most up to date statutory sick pay SSP entitlements are reflected in the actual absence policy and the staff handbook. And I guess it's the same
Yeah.
here in terms of all the other different various types of employee leave. Are your policies and is your staff handbook up to date? So business owners and managers need to make sure the policies are current in terms of the notice periods, the length of service requirements, as Liz outlined there, the different elements of ensuring that the leave is managed correctly. Also, I would say your leave policies should explain clearly how leave requests are to be submitted. For example, how is priority going to be decided where multiple employees want to take the same dates or the same weeks, things of that nature. Because when the request and the approval process is clear, I think that's going to take the stress out of it for all concerned.
Yeah.
And keeping one really valuable point is keeping an up-to-date leave calendar. It's a practical step. So what I'm thinking of there is a shared leave calendar. It allows the managers in the business to see who's off, where cover is required for peak weeks and so on, where dates might clash. And this then will hopefully avoid any surprises, last minute scrambling for cover, things of that nature. And ideally, a business would be using a leave management tool, like for example, HR Buddy Manager, where there is a built-in leave calendar. A manager then they can see who's on leave and when. HR Buddy Manager then would also, for example, a useful feature is that it gives employees visibility on their own individual leave balances, so staff will know, okay, how many leave days have I left for this year? When can I take them? What is the requesting and approval process and so on? It makes the whole thing more transparent, more easy to manage, in my view.
Yeah, I think so. Like the point I would make is the technology is there now. We have it inside the HR Buddy Manager platform. Like it's available very cheaply. That technology is there. So, people should explore having that kind of information at their fingertips because it's, as you're saying, Colin, it's easier to manage leave requests then. There's less disgruntlement. I suppose one of the things we see as well is where leave is denied to employees, but it's granted to another employee. And there doesn't seem to be a system or a policy in place. There doesn't seem to be technology in place to be able to, pull up that information in front of the line manager. And then it gets very personal between the line manager and the employee. And, you have trouble.
Yeah, that's good. And that's a good point. If I could just say we'll say, from a compliance point of view, the record keeping, that is vital, I guess, in terms of, there is legislation there, namely the Organisation of Working Time Act. So there are requirements there in terms of maintaining the detail on leave requests, the approvals, employee balances, and any related information, as you said, and definitely on if there's going to be refusals or postponements or anything of that nature, that all of the information is retained, and there are statutory requirements in terms of lengths of time that you keep these records for as well. So I think if you can take the manual nature out of that work, put it into a HR management platform, leave management tool, something of that nature, that's going to make things easier. So
what I would also say is, just with regards to the whole, before we're going to move on to another very interesting WRC case, but the summertime challenges and, the working parents that have kids off school going to camps at different times, it's more awkward and it's more challenging. And then you have good weather and maybe you have some sick leave and you've all that going on inside in the busy period. Everyone's juggling everything. I suppose working parents want to, make those memories and enjoy their kids' time off from school and all that type of thing as well. So very often you have that kind of I suppose parent guilt, where when they're at work, they feel guilty for not being with their kids who are off school and in the middle of their summer. And then when they're with their kids and they're maybe they're feeling guilty about not performing or being as productive as they usually are at work. So it is a challenge. I think one piece of advice I would give to workplace is don't let it continue to be the elephant in the room. We should address everything. And if the period is challenging for an awful lot of workers, but at least address that it's challenging. I suppose at the end of the day, we have to go to work, we have to perform, businesses need to keep on running. It's busy inside in organisations and workplaces and businesses at this time of the year as well. But, at least acknowledging it rather than keeping it as the elephant in the room. I don't think it's the right way to deal with it or to deal with anything indeed. So I think I think it always remains an elephant, or in an awful case, it remains the elephant in the room. And I don't think that's the right approach.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, will we move on to this WRC case?
Yeah, and I think, look, as we're discussing, as you said, they're navigating leave requests, updating, having a clear policy and consistent approach and so on in place, flexible working during the summer months, all those different elements. And I think this is a decision that was only published in the last week or so, and it is a useful reminder, and it is illustrative in terms of showing that, leave policies, flexibility arrangements, remote working arrangements, and so on, they all need to be managed through clear rules, consistent application of the approval process, and also, I guess, maintaining accurate records as well, I would say. So published in the last week, the core detail of this case really, Damien, is that there was an employee who was found to be working remotely from India without authorization, because there was, at the same time, there was a clear contractual requirement that the employee should be based in the Dublin office of the employer.
I think this one is incredible. The employee is in India for 5 weeks, and the employer doesn't know it.
Very lonesome, and actually interesting, there was several reasons put forward for the non-attendance when I was reading it, that allegedly the complainant had a cold and that was preventing him from attending office meetings. Also then there was allegations of that he was experiencing bullying from his manager. They were put forward. So several reasons were thrown up for why the employee could not attend in the office. But I guess ultimately, he could not make himself available to attend the Dublin. He subsequently had his employment terminated and then pursued a claim under the unfair dismissals legislation there. Now, I guess
and didn't win it.
And didn't win it, ultimately failed. And I think a standout point from the decision for me anyway was the comment of the adjudication officer, who said that the claimant had ultimately altered his own predicament due to maintaining his stance that he was not working outside the country, but then being unable to attend the on-site meetings, despite having an address. I think his manager believed that he was within 5 or 10 minutes walking of the office location. So, really interesting findings and conclusion into this one. And I think outside the specifics of the case, I think there's 2 takeaways here, really. One, again, having clearly communicated company policies in place, that needs to be the starting point. And actually, interestingly, the employer in this instance, PwC, they had an allowance for up to 30 days overseas working in their remote working policy, which actually had been exceeded in this case. So it's important to have the policies in place, as we've been talking about. And also then in terms of, if there are agreements in place for remote working, flexible working, hybrid, what have you, there might be arrangements in place for, we'll say, core office hours, or mandatory office day arrangements, where you have to be on site within certain hours of the day, or a certain amount of days in a week or month, or whatever the situation is.
And very often they are inside an employment contracts, as in, which I would suggest as well, because you need to be fair, you need to keep it
absolutely.
Uniformed if you can. Okay, flexibility is great, but there is an awful lot of remote and flexible working now anyway, to be fair. And organisations are happy to run it. But I think we do see an awful lot of stuff coming across our desk where there is a kind of a remote or hybrid working arrangement, and it's even inside in the contract, but then it isn't being adhered to. So there's an employee kind of after a few weeks, you kind of realise, I haven't seen them in a few weeks.
Which was the case here,
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
And so
5 weeks,
and only when there's a situation in where the employee was needed to attend an in-person meeting that wasn't able to attend, and the game was up, I guess. But to your point, if there's arrangements in place, to be fair to everybody, I suppose, if there's arrangements in place for flexibility or for remote working, whatever the case is, that I guess that data needs to be available, and I would suggest needs to be adhered to, but monitored as well.
Yeah, I think I've seen a few examples of you have hybrid working, it isn't being adhered to, and the kind of 2 days in the office, it isn't being adhered to. That agreement isn't being adhered to. But what you then have is maybe the line manager in a hybrid situation as well. So in an awful lot of cases, it does run on for a while before the line manager or the workplace catches up, kind of thing. And like I go back to technology again, and your clocky in, your clocky out, your geolocation. Eventually, in this case, PwC go to the IT and get the IP address is in India and had been from September to November for about a 5-week period. But if you have the technology, and I think it's a responsibility for employers to know where their employees are working from. It's your entitlement, because there is health and safety to be looked after as well. So if someone isn't working from the workplace location that may be in their contract, and there is a hybrid or remote working arrangement, the employer, to be compliant with even health and safety and the welfare of the employee, needs to know, to meet their obligations, where that employee is working from. And if you're not running the technology, or you don't have the technology, my advice is you should. Excuse me. I think it's quite incredible that the employer in this instance, that it took 5 weeks. I mean, again, it's easy nowadays with geolocation tracking and so on, which is something I think that all employers should be doing, especially where they have remote and hybrid working. It's a very interesting case. Okay, well, we'll move on to, and again, if you have a question or a query and you're on live on the podcast with us today, you can pop it in the chat, in the Q&A section. Okay, Colin, I'm staying with you. We're going to talk about public holidays. Again, it's incredible. We keep on getting the queries about public holidays.
Absolutely.
There always seems to be confusion. Do a bit of explaining on this for us, please.
Sure. And it comes up around every bank holiday. There will be queries before and afterwards, and I'm sure, as you said, we're running a live Q&A today. I haven't looked yet, but I'm sure there may be questions on public holidays.
Already, yep.
Yeah, it's I guess it's something that can look simple on paper, but in practice it creates plenty of questions. And yeah, we feel the same queries in the run up to each public holiday. In terms of who qualifies for payment, some of the most common queries really is what if the employee is part-time? What if the public holiday falls on a day that the individual doesn't normally work? Do they still qualify? So there are issues that cause confusion, I think, but the key is to have, again, a clear approach in terms of rostering, payroll, and your policies and your staff handbook and your leave entitlements and so on all needs to be updated as well. Just on, if I can touch on the part-time workers, I think that is something that needs careful attention.
We always get queries on part-time.
Absolutely.
Public holidays.
And I think just to state that, look, part-time workers do qualify for public holiday benefits as long as they've worked, it's 40 hours in the previous 5 weeks. But what we need to ensure here is that your people managers, your HR, your payroll, everyone is aligned basically, because sometimes I think what happens is the entitlement, maybe it's not readily obvious in terms of maybe the person isn't working every week. Maybe it's a more casual arrangement or something of that nature. So we're saying, do they still qualify? But I guess the point is, once the threshold is met, then the person qualifies for public holiday entitlements. And the similar one then is this individual doesn't work on Mondays. Invariably, the public holiday falls on a Monday. So are they really entitled to it? Yeah, it does. It does crop up all the time as well. I guess the short answer is yes. The person is still entitled to public holiday benefit, but the payment will be calculated as normally it's 1/5 of their normal working week.
Yeah, pro-rata.
Pro-rata, exactly.
I suppose the 4 benefits are very important. Is that the employer does have the flexibility, but I think we're going to go back again and say it's a lot more easily managed when everyone knows where they are and they know which one of the 4 they're getting. That maybe you have a policy on it, because otherwise there's confusion. It gets hard to manage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
Yeah, I think like consistency is key there. I think whatever you've done before, you keep doing so you don't change it to each public holiday. That's an issue that's cropped up for me as well.
Paying for one public holiday and then giving holidays for the next one and doing different things with different people. So
Yeah, just
yeah,
consistent.
if you can achieve uniformity and consistency, it's just easier to manage and less time consuming.
So yeah, a clear policy clearly lays out the four benefits in terms of the paid day off on the holiday, another paid day off within the month, an extra annual leave day, or the extra pay, and that the employer maintains the discretion on how that benefit is going to be paid out. I think actually, just on the topic of family leave and so on, a similar query that does actually come up quite a bit as well, related to the discussion on parental leave, is a staff member is now taking parental leave on Mondays, and I would be asked fairly regularly, do they now forfeit their entitlements to benefit from the public holiday? And I guess the answer is generally employees retain their entitlement during periods of statutory leave, including parental leave and the different types of statutory leave.
So they don't lose out on the benefits like a public holiday just because there is, and it's the same when you're I think employees on sick leave as well. They don't lose the public holiday just because they're sick.
Yeah, I think the confusion mainly stems from the part-time workers, as we said. Maybe employees are working shift, so maybe they're not working then on the public holiday, or maybe people are maybe part-time work, or there are situations like parental leave or so on where they're now not working on the Mondays. Just one final point in a common query on public holidays as well is that what happens if the public holiday falls on a Saturday or a Sunday, for example, Christmas Day. And I guess, yes, the employee, again, is still entitled to the public holiday benefit. But one point to call out here is that there is no legal right to insist on the following Monday off unless the employer chooses that. So that's important to have called out within the leave policy as well, is that the employer decides which of the four statutory benefits applies.
Yeah, that often happens, I think, over the Christmas period in comparison to other stages of the year in businesses where, workers are required. I'd be thinking like retail here, they'd have, post-Christmas or New Year's sales. And, the employee thinks it's their right to have that Monday off, but actually the public holiday fell on Saturday, so you're entitled to the public holiday under the four is what you're saying. You don't get to dictate the day. Okay, I suppose, to sum up, Colin, we're talking an awful lot here about the management of leave, public holidays, managing remote workers, maybe some workplaces get it wrong, as for the WRC case, and not being able to track their employees. So, to touch into what we can provide with HR Buddy Manager, maybe you can run through that a little bit, because I think it could help an awful lot of people.
Absolutely, and I think as you touched on there, Damien, if the facility and the tools are there for the likes of geolocation, as you said, or we've spoken about leave management and so on. If the tools are there, then and they're available cheaply, then they should be utilised. And I think HR Buddy can be a strong fit for the likes of leave management, because it centralises, for example, annual leave, the annual leave requesting and approval process, absence, team visibility, takes it all into one system. And as we always say, one of the main features of HR Buddy Manager is that it's cutting down on manual work, avoiding duplicated records. It's all available centrally within one platform. There's automation there around the approvals, the balance tracking, leave history, the file locker, and so on. It's all there to help managers make quicker decisions, while giving the employees clearer visibility as well on their entitlements, what leave they've taken, what remains, and so on. And also, I guess, from an Organisation of Working Time Act compliance point of view, there's real value here in terms of the record keeping, accuracy of the records, consistency, and so on. And you have those features in terms of geolocation, clock in, clock out functionality, and so on. So it's important in terms of I guess showing that when you have a system like this in place, it does show that there's a structured approach being taken to leave management, time and attendance, and just overall compliance.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to mention again our Q&A. If you're on the show live with us this morning in chat Q&A, if you have a question or query, we're going to be getting to those in a minute. I also just want to mention as well, if you haven't listened or watched the podcast before, our previous podcasts are available on Spotify, on YouTube. It's available on web, app, and mobile, and they're completely free. You don't have to pay for this podcast that we're recording today. So again, please spread the word, and we do appreciate you listening in and watching, and especially as well the people that are on live here this morning. It's great to have you with us. Now, okay, we got through a lot. There's one more update, which I think is important to mention, because it's, I suppose, anything that's kind of currently out there, we try to ensure that we cover it for our clients and for whoever is viewing and listening to this podcast. So the maternity loss bill is something to watch out for. It seems this is now on the horizon, where there is draft legislation providing women who suffer an early miscarriage with 5 days of paid leave. So the Cabinet are bringing these proposals. The bill would also apply to women who receive an abortion before 12 weeks of pregnancy. So the proposal is that paid leave would be offered for the first time to women who suffer a miscarriage. So it's not currently something that's in law, and it's before 23 weeks of pregnancy. So these plans are being considered by government now. It's similar to legislation being introduced in other jurisdictions, and has already similar laws in this area have been introduced in Northern Ireland and Malta. So it's something to keep an eye on with regards to that draft legislation coming into law over the next couple of months. Okay, we're going to move on. We have questions that have come in for our live Q&A section. So we'll run through those now. And as always, we seem to be getting great questions. And I think this is probably the favourite part of the podcast for me, because the questions are always great. So I'll go. The first one is, can my staff wear shorts to work? Can I stop it, or how do I stop it? It's unprofessional for our customers. Okay. Liz, go on. What do you think it is?
Yeah, of course, me. I mean, look, it depends really, doesn't it? I think if you're client facing, if you've different obligations, you're meeting clients, there is probably a level of like a standard of dress that needs to be there. Maybe some of the backroom staff, warehouse staff, things like that, maybe a cafe, you might be able to get away with wearing shorts. And I'd always just look, again, very policy driven, look at your own dress code policies. But also the other side of it is, be honest and just say, look, yes, you can wear shorts, not sports shorts, not your Adidas, your O'Neill shorts, anything like that. A little bit smarter dressed, depending on the nature of the business. The flip side of that as well is, if you are client facing and you're not able to implement that you do have quite a strict dress code. What I would say is look at what other accommodations maybe. So maybe look at kind of in-house ventilation. What's that like in the office? Are you meeting those health and safety, maybe kind of extra water breaks, reducing hours? Probably not, but again, you just want to look at all the alternatives to justify why people maybe can't wear the shorts. So what I would say, if you can accommodate it, I would. But again, it will come down to your policies and, again, nature
I think there's two
of the role.
policies. There's the dress code policy and there's the extreme weather policy. And if you have a policy that's tailored to your workplace, it'll make sense. Only some workplaces can accommodate for people wearing shorts and that type of thing. In an awful lot of other workplaces, just from a health and safety point of view, it's not possible. And I suppose from a professional point of view, it maybe isn't possible either. But if you're working in a modern workplace, and we get it on remote working as well, like that during hot weather, which we're having at the moment, can employees or should employees work from home? In most modern workplaces, you're better off at work because they have the AC and so on. So so there's maybe a bit of game playing going on there. But have an extreme weather policy that suits your organisation,
Yeah.
and have a dress code policy that explains it, rather than dealing with someone coming in shorts and having to have that conversation with them, I suppose, is the point we would make. Okay, next question. Do I have to pay for bank holidays? Colin, maybe you can do this because you went through the detail. Do I have to pay for bank holidays, or can I give a day off when it's quieter? It's busy during summer holidays, but most of my staff want the money.
Yeah,
Okay.
interesting. Yeah. So I guess look, it'll always relate back to having a clear policy, and I would suggest viewers can get in touch with us as well, and if we need to spec out a leave policy that's tailored to your business, to make sure that it's clear and shows people their entitlements and what the process is. But I guess it's going to relate back to the policy, and again, yes, I think as was asked there, that my staff want the money. Of course, people will be thinking about, I'll get the extra day's pay and so on, and I think that's natural that staff would prefer that option. But I guess at the end of the day, the employer is going to decide in terms of there are the options. Maybe you decide that it isn't an extra day's pay at the moment, and maybe it's an extra day's annual leave or something. And of course, if it's a business that's particularly busy at the moment, maybe you need to look at the different options.
Policy. Have the policy in writing that.
Policy in writing, clearly communicated. Look, that these are the options. This is the one that the employer has elected to go with. It's not the extra day's pay at the moment, but maybe it's a paid day off at a more manageable time for the business.
So the entitlement is met. Yeah, the entitlement. Because I suppose the problem here, I would imagine, for the person asking the question is cash flow. Like, it can be difficult. And I suppose you have to meet your obligations in awarding your employees with the public holiday entitlements. There's 4 ways to do that, so it doesn't have to be the pay.
Yeah.
But we're saying you need to communicate that. You maybe need to have in your policy, in your contract terms, and have it agreed so that it's clear for everyone. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. So for the piece on incorporating the denial of leave due to business volume, project deadlines, other employees taking leave into how would you recommend the company do or word this? What I would say is it is going to be different from company to company. Every company is different because they're different businesses, so there's different business reasons. I suppose what you want to achieve is that if you're challenged on it, you're not going to be defeated. So there's a number of things that come into consideration, such as headcount. I mean, if you're dealing with, it's not unreasonable if you're dealing with something like a full parental leave that you may need to rehire and that you would need to delay it so that you replace the person before you, and that may be possible for one of the postponements and be a justifiable reason. But I suppose, look, how long is a piece of string? When you go from different business to different business, it would look different with regards to, I suppose, what are justifiable business reasons to postpone. I mentioned one very obvious one earlier on, I suppose, where your end of year is November and your company accountant or your financial manager is looking to take that time off. It's a justifiable reason in that scenario to try and delay past the end of year kind of thing. But it's a case-by-case basis, and every case can be different, and every business is different. So I don't think I can give you kind of a complete, concrete answer on this. What I would say is, if you need help incorporating these things into your policy, get in contact with us at info@hrbuddy.ie, and we'd be happy to maybe advise you on it. Another question. How do you? Sorry, Colin. Do you want to make a point on that?
Oh, can I just suggest there, Damon, as you'd mentioned earlier about WRC cases in relation to, we'll say, right to request remote work or right to request flexible work and so on. I guess, to your point there, that companies need to be thoughtful and try to facilitate requests where possible, but just to make sure that the policy is written and in line with there are codes of practice out there, just to make sure that the policy is in line with statutory requirements, and that the timelines and the obligations within those codes of practice are being adhered to. I think that's important as well.
Yeah, okay, fair point. Next question: how do you determine, argue if one employee's leave request is more important or prioritized over others? So again, it's different from business to business. I would go back again to the policy, and if you have something like, it's first come, first served, well then, that's the policy. I suppose that can seem unfair sometimes because we all know those employees who book up all the time off, like kind of once the, January 1st comes, they spent their entire Christmas making out their calendar and they're straight in there getting all the holidays. Everyone knows one of them. But again, you have to practice fairness, but also it's important to have in your policy that there is a time frame in requesting leave. So is it unfair if someone comes kind of 2 days beforehand looking for 2 or 3 days off, or is that not allowable in your policy? And it's fair to not have something like that allowable in your policy as well. So whilst you may have a first come, first served policy, it also, I suppose, gets your workers organised as well. And I suppose another thing that you can do inside an employment contracts and so on is state that there is a limited amount of leave available for certain time periods of the year. Like that may be summer months in hospitality businesses, for example. It may be end of year in your accounts department. And it's reasonable, I suppose, to limit, and it's important to make the point as well that, annual leave and leaves, they are entitlements with regards, I suppose, everything bar remote working and flexible working, which is something that you can request. It's not something you're entitled to. But with regards to annual leave, public holidays and so on, they are an entitlement. So as long as you, the employer, afford your employees of their entitlements, you can still maintain control in your policy in how you afford it to them, and you can still suit your business. Last question. Okay, so we're wrapping up. Must I now advertise the salary on job advertisements because of the new laws? Okay, so I think that's a reference to the EU Transparency Directive, which actually hasn't come into law. What I say to this individual here is we covered that on a previous podcast. So the podcasts are free, mobile, app, web, Spotify and YouTube. If you want to go on there, you'll get it all in detail. Our colleague Breach Fallon gave a comprehensive synopsis of it on one of our previous podcasts. So hop in there and look at that, and I think it'd be very helpful for you. Legally, at the moment, no, you don't, but it is coming. So Ireland missed the deadline with regards to the EU directive back on 7th of June, so it's delayed. They may possibly be fined by the EU for it, by the way, as well. But there is a delay on it. It's postponed. I suppose that postponement is being allowed and accommodated for by the EU for the moment, but it is coming. So what we have said is, to all workplaces, you need to be prepared because it is happening, and that's a certainty. So with regards advertising your salary and job advertisements, giving information to employees on the average pay, all that can be requested and so on. And there's a number of other key changes, but I don't have time to run through all that now. As I said, on a previous podcast, you can get that if you haven't listened or watched that one. Okay, folks, that's the Q&A section. Always very good. Thanks for the questions. They were great. Thanks to Liz and Colin for today's show. Well done, guys. Thanks if you've listened or watched. If you enjoyed it, go back, watch the previous podcasts, or keep coming in future. There's plenty more to come from us on the HR Buddy podcast. It's info@hrbuddy.ie if you need any of our help. You can look up our website at www.hrbuddy.ie. And again, the podcast is available on Spotify, YouTube, and it's all for free. Thanks, guys, and see you next time. Bye-bye.